A heartbeat from a dead body in the autopsy room changed a doctor's life forever. The bond that emerged will reveal why this night was a miracle. The rain fell heavily on Houston, drawing lines on the window of the autopsy room. The clock struck almost midnight. The hospital slept in silence except for the occasional beep from a distant monitor inside the room. Cold, Dr. Alex Rivas, a man of almost 50, adjusted his gloves and tried to hide the fatigue he felt in his shoulders. The door opened with a soft squeak. A worker pushed in a stretcher covered with a white sheet. The noise of the wheels on the tile floor mixed with the sound of the rain. "He arrived a short while ago," said the worker in a low voice. "Car accident, young man." Alex nodded without saying anything. He didn't say anything. The man left the room, and the door closed slowly, restoring silence for a few seconds. The doctor just stood there, looking at the stretcher. The sheet was wet at the edges. The cold light from the ceiling cast a shadow over her face. He took a deep breath and lifted the fabric carefully, as if afraid of disturbing her. The woman's face appeared under the light. Young, her skin still had the color of life that had just left her. A small cut on her forehead. A strand of hair stuck to her face. Long eyelashes. Her mouth slightly open. There was something about her that made him pause. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Alex lifted the sheet a little more, looking closely. There were no documents, nothing to indicate who she was, just a label on her wrist with cold, dry letters. Unknown, no identification. The doctor ran his hand over his face, trying to dispel the discomfort growing in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper, a strange feeling, as if he had seen that face somewhere before. At some time he couldn't quite remember. He adjusted the sheet and spoke softly, in a tone that mixed respect and weariness. "Who were you?" His voice was lost in the air, muffled by the sound of rain hitting the window. The clock on the wall continued to mark the time indifferently. The second hand moved slowly, as Alex took the chart and wrote down his first observations. Female, approximately 21 years old, victim of a traffic accident. No identification. But the pen stopped halfway through the line. He looked again at the woman's face and felt a knot in his stomach, a slight but insistent discomfort. It was like trying to remember the name of someone he had loved and forgotten. The room was illuminated by a lamp that flickered with each clap of thunder. The reflection of the light outlined her face, soft, almost peaceful. Alex moved a little closer. There was a small stain near her lower lip. His gaze remained fixed there for some reason. That small mark disturbed him. The doctor looked away and walked to the sink. He washed his hands again, even though it wasn't necessary. The cold water made him shiver. The fatigue of years of work weighed heavily on his back. How many times had he been there? How many faces had passed by that table, each with their own interrupted story? But this woman was different. He turned back to her and just looked at her. The silence in the room seemed to speak to him. The rain outside, the sound of the wind, the humming of the lamp, everything blended together, creating an atmosphere of farewell. He took a step forward and adjusted the lock of hair that covered part of her face. The touch was gentle, almost an apology. The cold skin made him recoil, but he stayed close, watching in silence. Alex noticed the simple ring on her left hand, worn and scratched, but still shining a little in the light. That made him swallow. A ring like that wasn't expensive, but it carried love. For a moment he imagined who might have given her that ring. A husband, a boyfriend, someone who perhaps didn't yet knew she had died. He took a deep breath. A distant thunderclap made the window vibrate. The whole hospital seemed to shrink with the sound. He arranged the instruments on the table. The sound of metal against steel echoed in the room. When he finished, he stopped again. He couldn't begin. Something inside him hesitated. He looked again at her calm, beautiful, familiar face. Dr. Rivas didn't understand why, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time inside. A true sadness. Not the cold, technical sadness he had learned to endure, but a living, human pain that arose from some forgotten place within him. He remained silent for a long time. Outside, the rain fell. Inside the room, the ticking of the clock seemed a constant reminder that life went on even when someone stopped breathing. The doctor then closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. When he opened them, he looked at the woman again and thought without saying anything. No one should leave like this. Alone, without a name, without a goodbye. He moved a little closer, lowered his voice, and whispered as if she could still hear him. Rest in peace. I will take care of you with respect. He looked over the body once more with respect, with care. The woman appeared to be in her 20s, too young. There was a small cut on her forehead and some marks on her arm, signs of the blow, but her face was almost intact. It was pretty delicate, filled with a strange peace. Alex took the board and began to write down the basic information. Female, approximate age 25, no documents, no relatives present. But the pen failed halfway through the line. He shook his wrist in annoyance and then stopped. He looked at the body again and wondered how long that woman had been alone before she came to him. For a moment, the doctor forgot where he was. He forgot that he was in an autopsy room with cold walls and too much white light. He seemed to be facing someone who was asleep, someone who could still wake up at any moment. His heart was beating more slowly, a confusing feeling as if he had seen that same look before. But no, it couldn't be. It was just fatigue, more than 30 hours on call, little food, a lot of silence. The mind played tricks during those hours. The scalpel glinted in the cold light, still between the gloved fingers of Dr. Alex Rivas. The room was completely silent, but that night something prevented him from following protocol. He looked down. Everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. There was something different, a small, subtle lump, a slight elevation in the woman's belly. It wasn't the kind of swelling he usually saw. He frowned and placed his hand on the sheet. For a moment, he thought it might just be gas, something common in trauma victims. But when he pressed gently, he felt something strange, a slight resistance, a living weight. He stopped, removed his hand, and remained silent, his eyes fixed. He took a step back, his heart racing, but he tried to calm himself. He approached again, touching as gently as he could, placing his palm back on her abdomen. Then he felt it, a small, almost invisible movement, but real, like a little push from inside. The air left Alex's lungs. He froze, his eyes wide open. His mind refused to believe it. "No," he whispered, almost without a voice. "This can't be possible." But the touch returned, a slight tremor under the woman's cold skin, and suddenly a soft, wet sound. The liquid ran down the edge of the table and fell to the floor with a dull plop. The scalpel slipped from his hand, hitting the metal and making a sound that could be heard throughout the room. Alex took a step back, feeling his body tense up. His breathing became short, his chest tightened for a second. He thought it was a hallucination caused by exhaustion. But no, he knew what he had felt. The woman's body was still, without a pulse, without life, and yet there was something inside her that was moving. He brought his hand to his forehead, trying to think. Cold sweat ran down the back of his neck. He looked back at the bulge. It seemed to move a little, as if the air itself were pulsing inside. The silence was heavy. The sound of the rain outside was distant and muffled. Everything around him seemed to stop. Alex approached, his heart beating wildly. He touched her again, more firmly, and felt a new movement, clearer now, more defined. It was life. If that moment made your heart race, tap, like so more people find this story. His eyes filled with surprise, and his voice came out trembling. "My God, there's something alive in here," he whispered. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. His whole body was shaking. His hands, accustomed to scalpels and precise cuts, now didn't know where to touch. He swallowed. He needed to be sure. He bent down to get a better look at her abdomen. The light fell on the woman's pale skin, and now he could see something else. A slight, rhythmic movement, almost like breathing, but it wasn't coming from her. "It can't be," he repeated more loudly. He took a quick step toward the intercom, but no sound came out. He opened his mouth and tried to scream, but nothing came out except, "My God, help me." Her chest seemed closed. He returned to the body, his gaze fixed on the woman's belly. Every second, his mind struggled between medical thinking and human instinct. Suddenly, another drop of liquid dripped from the warm, light-colored table. Alex held his breath. The sound of the liquid falling to the floor was like a clock ticking away the impossible. He moved away a little, resting his hands on the table. His body was shaking. His gloves were sweaty inside. His voice came out weak, almost a whisper. This is impossible. But the impossible was right there in front of him. The doctor's heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo off the walls. Everything he had learned, all the years of work, all the rules, protocols, and diagnoses, nothing explained what he was seeing now. The scalpel was still on the floor, motionless as if it had also stopped breathing. Alex closed his eyes for a moment, trying to concentrate. He counted to 3, held his breath, and opened them again. He looked firmly at the abdomen. The movement repeated itself. Now it was clearer, stronger. His throat felt dry. His legs were shaking, but he couldn't walk away. He slowly reached out his hand and touched the belly again, and what he felt now completely took the air out of his lungs. It was a little push, a touch from inside, as if someone in there was asking for help. The door opened slowly. Lucy Morales, the nurse, entered panting, her hair tied back as best she could, and her uniform wet. If you were Lucy right now, would you call for help or keep quiet? Tell me in the comments. Doctor, you called on the intercom, she said, trying to understand what she was seeing. What's going on here? Alex looked up, still dazed, his voice hoarse and broken. He's alive. Lucy paused, swallowing hard. The baby? Lucy's eyes widened in disbelief. What do you mean the baby is alive? She's a woman, doctor. She has no pulse, doctor. She's been dead for hours. Alex took a deep breath, walked over to the table, gently touched the woman's abdomen, and looked at the nurse. I don't understand it either, but she has a baby, and its heart is still beating. I felt it. I saw it. She took a step back, frightened. Doctor, the protocol is clear. No one could survive in a situation like this. We have to notify the director, call the police, follow procedure. He closed his eyes for a second, trying to calm down. Procedure, he repeated under his breath. The procedure is to give up. Lucy remained silent, not knowing how to respond. The sound of the rain mixed with the distant noise of the hospital generators. Alex leaned on the table, staring at the woman in front of him. The white light highlighted the exhaustion on his face. His eyes were red and filled with tears, and his gown was already stained with blood and sweat. I've been trying to save lives for 30 years, Lucy, and now there's one right here fighting to live. And you want me to pretend I didn't hear that heart beating? Lucy swallowed hard. The emotion in her voice made her hesitate. Doctor, if you do this, you could lose everything. Your license, your job, even your career. He took a deep breath and replied firmly without looking away. I don't care. As long as there is a beating heart, there is hope. The silence that followed was heavy. Lucy lowered her head, clenching her hands. She seemed to be fighting with something inside her, between reason and faith, between fear and what she saw in his eyes. She tried to speak, but her voice failed her. What if it doesn't work? What if you open this woman up outside of protocol and without permission? Alex approached her, put his hand on her shoulder, and spoke softly. Then at least we tried. He's not going to die without someone fighting for him. Lucy looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. That man, almost 50 years old, tired and trembling, still believed in what many had already forgotten, the value of life, even when all seemed lost. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and replied firmly, Whatever you need, I'm with you, Alex. He felt a lump in his throat. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just nodded with a look of deep gratitude. Let's do this right, he said, trying to control his emotion in silence. No one can know. Understood? Lucy nodded quickly, fear mixed with courage on her face. The two began to prepare the room, moving instruments, cleaning the table, turning on lights, checking equipment, all in a hurry, but also with care. Every sound of metal clanging against metal, sounding like a reminder of the risk they were taking. Lucy glanced sideways at him. Doctor, what if someone comes in? Alex replied, without taking his eyes off the body. No one is going to come in. This part of the hospital is empty because of the storm. We don't have much time. She felt nervous. The sound of the rain mixed with the sound of gloves being put on, and the scalpel placed on the tray. For a moment the doctor paused and stared at the woman on the table. her calm face, her cold skin, the simple ring on her finger. "I'm sorry," he murmured softly, almost like a prayer, "but I can't let your tears die like this." Lucy heard him, and a tear rolled silently down her cheek. The whole hospital seemed to be asleep. The lights flickered because of the storm, and the wind blew hard against the windows. But inside that room, something was happening. A silent struggle between fear and faith, between protocol and the heart. Lucy picked up the equipment and looked at him. "Doctor, are you sure?" He looked back at her, and for the first time that night, smiled, even though his eyes were filled with tears. "I have hope, and sometimes that's all it takes to start a miracle." Lucy took a deep breath, wiped her face, and nodded. "Then let's do the impossible," she said, and Alex replied in a firm voice, "Secret." The rain continued to fall outside, strong and constant, as if the sky were crying too. Inside the room, the air was heavy, but there was something different, something alive that was growing. The doctor and the nurse knew they were about to cross a line, but they also knew that giving up was not an option that night. The wind outside seemed to be crazy, the windows banging loudly, and the sound of the rain against the glass sounded like 1,000 desperate fingers trying to get in. The storm shook the hospital, and the light flickered at short intervals, as if struggling not to go out. Alex Rivas arranged the instruments on the table with trembling hands. Sweat ran down under his gloves, and his heart beat in his neck. Lucy Morales tried to stay calm, but the tears were already wanting to come out. "Doctor, the lights are failing throughout the hospital," she said, looking around nervously. "What if the power goes out?" Alex took a deep breath and replied without looking away, "Then we'll do what we can." The sound of thunder drowned out the sound of his own voice. The lights flickered once or twice, and suddenly everything went black. Darkness filled the room like a blow. Lucy let out a muffled cry. "My God! The power's out!" For a second, panic almost overwhelmed them. All they could hear the sound of rain and their heavy breathing. Alex groped in the darkness and found the emergency lamp on the wall. He pressed the button, and a faint beam of yellow light came on. The room was in semi-darkness. The light was so dim that it barely illuminated their faces, but it was enough. "It'll do," he said in a firm voice, although inside, he was very afraid. "We can't stop now." Lucy took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm with you, doctor." There was no sound from the hospital generator. No machines. Nothing. The hospital seemed dead. Only that room remained standing, illuminated by a thread of light and sustained by the faith of two hearts. Alex leaned over the body, his hands steady but his eyes filled with tears. The scalpel trembled between his fingers. He lifted it carefully, took a deep breath, and said almost in a whisper, "Come on, little one, a little longer." Lucy stood beside him, her hands clasped, her eyes closed. "Please, God, help us." The sound of the scalpel cutting through the skin was the only noise in the room, a precise, controlled sound, but full of emotion. Every movement seemed to weigh heavily. Alex worked with the delicacy of someone carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sweat ran down his forehead, mixing with the cold air in the room. The emergency light flickered, sometimes growing weaker, almost going out. Every time that happened, Lucy held her breath, her eyes fixed on the screen. The silence was deep, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that screams inside. Alex tried to stay focused, but with every passing second, he felt his heart beating faster. "No, don't give up now," he said softly, more to himself than to the baby. Lucy clutched the sheet on the stretcher tightly. "Doctor, he's still here," she interrupted him, her voice trembling. "He's here. I'm sorry." His breathing began to falter. The scalpel slipped a little, but he held it tightly. The light flickered again. Thunder shook the window glass. Lucy cried silently but didn't stop helping. She passed him the instruments, wiped the sweat from his eyes, and cleaned the blood without taking her eyes off what they were doing. "Come on, doctor," she said through her tears. "You can do it. You can always do it." Alex hardly heard her. He was totally focused on that moment. Nothing else existed anymore. Not the hospital, not the fear, not the risk. Only that cold body, that belly still alive, and the sound of his own heart beating without rhythm. For a moment the world seemed to stop. The emergency lamp flickered, grew weaker, and then came the deep silence that squeezed his chest. Lucy stopped breathing. Alex looked up, the scalpel suspended in the air, sweat dripping down his chin. The sound of the rain outside seemed more distant, and then something happened. A small, soft sound, an almost inaudible moan coming from the motionless body on the table. Alex felt his legs buckle. Lucy opened her eyes, confused. "Doctor, did you hear that?" she whispered. He didn't respond. He was paralyzed. The sound came back louder now, clearer, a weak, trembling cry, but real. Lucy covered her mouth with her hands. "It's him," she said between sobs. "My God, it's him!" Alex dropped the scalpel, his hands covered in red, his eyes full of emotion. He leaned over the small body that was now breathing, still covered in fluid, warmth, life. The weak cry broke the silence of the room like a ray of light. Lucy cried uncontrollably. Alex held his breath, trembling, unable to believe what he was seeing. He reached out his hands and, with almost sacred care, lifted the baby. He was very small, almost fitting completely in his fragile hand. Warm, crying softly, tears running down his face. He took a deep breath, feeling his whole body tremble. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're strong, little one. You're a miracle." Lucy put her hand on his shoulder, crying with him. "He's alive, doctor. He's alive." Outside, the storm continued, but now the sound was different. The baby's cry filled the room, soft and pure, mixed with the sound of the rain. Alex looked at the little being in his arms and smiled for the first time in a long time. That soft cry, that sound, was the sound of life overcoming the impossible. Alex still held the baby in his arms, the little body wrapped in a makeshift white cloth. The sound of soft crying filled the room, breaking the heavy silence of the early morning. Lucy wiped her tears, looking at the miracle that had just happened, but the doctor couldn't smile. His eyes were fixed on the face of the woman on the table, the same woman who minutes before had given life and now lay motionless, cold, silent. He approached slowly, the baby still clinging to her chest. Each step felt heavier than the last. His heart was beating fast, as if it wanted to jump out of his chest. Something inside him was telling him to look again, to pay attention. He placed the cloth over the baby, left it in Lucy's arms, and went over to the body. The emergency light flickered, creating shadows that came and went, but he didn't look away. There was something in that face, something he knew, although he didn't know where. Alex's hands were shaking. He stretched out one of them and carefully moved the strand of hair that covered the woman's neck. The light hit her side, illuminating her pale skin, and there was a small mark, a birthmark in the exact same place, a soft, crescent-shaped pattern. He stood still. Time stood still. His breathing became short. His throat closed up. He could hardly whisper, without a voice. "It can't be." He brought his face a little closer, as if he needed to confirm it with his own eyes. The lamp trembled above, making the spot seem alive. He brought his hand to his mouth, trying to stop his body from shaking. The memories came like a blow, fast and disordered, cutting through the air. The image of a pink crib, the sound of a giggle, a girl with bright eyes clutching his finger tightly, and then the despair, the police, the searches, the absence. Sophia. The name came as a scream inside his head. He took a step back, almost falling. "My God," his voice broke. Sophia Lucy, frightened, approached. "Doctor, what happened?" He looked at her with eyes full of tears, his face white as the wall. He pointed to the woman's neck. "That mark, that stain," he said with a trembling, broken voice. "It's the same as the one my daughter had when she was born." Lucy opened her eyes, unable to understanding. His daughter. Alex nodded slowly, tears already falling. "They took her away when she was a year old. I never heard anything more about her." His voice trembled, and now he stopped, unable to continue. Lucy looked at the body, and then at him, her heart tightening. "Are you sure?" Alex approached again, touching the woman's face, his thumb passing over the stain on her neck with a gesture full of pain and affection. "You would recognize that mark anywhere," he whispered. "I saw it myself when she was born. It was exactly the same." His voice broke completely. He stood there still, looking at the face of his lost daughter. Time seemed to go backwards. The dead woman in front of him was no longer a stranger. She was the girl he had carried, the girl who disappeared from his arms, the love that had been missing for 20 years. Lucy took a deep breath, her hand trembling on his shoulder. "Doctor," he murmured, searching for words. "My God, I'm so sorry." Alex didn't answer. He just lowered his head and rested his forehead on the woman's arm, as if he wanted to go back in time and ask forgiveness for everything he couldn't do. Tears fell down his face and onto the sheet, mixing with the blood and the rain that came in through the poorly closed window. Sophia whispered between sobs, "My love, my daughter." Lucy remained still, crying silently. The baby in the corner of the room made a soft sound, a gentle moan, as if feeling the weight of that pain. Alex slowly raised his face, his expression a mixture of surprise and guilt, with 1,000 old memories returning all at once. The light flickered again, and her face seemed to glow for a moment, as if to say, "I am here." He took a deep breath, trembling, and let out a whisper that filled the room, breaking the silence at once. "My God, Sophia, it's you." And then, unable to contain himself any longer, the man collapsed in tears in front of the body of the daughter that life had taken away, and that fate, for some mysterious reason, had just returned. Alex stood for a long time in front of his daughter's body. The room was filled with a silence that weighed heavier than the air outside. The rain was now just a distant murmur, but inside him the storm continued to rage. Each memory came like a new cut. His hands trembled when they touched the sheet. He touched her fearfully, as if that simple gesture could break the miracle and bring back the emptiness of the last 20 years. He looked at her face once more. He wanted to remember every detail, every shadow, every soft line that time had stolen from him. "My God," he murmured, almost without a voice. "I've spent half my life trying to understand why you took her from me, and now you've stopped, swallowing the tears. Now you're giving her back to me." The words came out choked, as if he were short of breath. He ran a hand over his face, trying to stop the tears, but he couldn't. The weight of guilt fell suddenly. He saw in his mind all the times he had thought of giving up. The night he burned the girl's clothes, telling himself that it was to move on. The days when he passed by the empty room and pretended not to see the toys. The whispered prayers in church, the silence that returned as an answer. The anger with God, the exhaustion, and finally the moment when he decided to stop searching. Now looking at her, he understood that he had never stopped searching. He had only hidden from the pain. Lucy watched him in silence, her heart tight. She didn't dare to approach him. This was a moment only for him, for a father and daughter that fate had separated and somehow brought together again. Alex took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His voice came out soft, but full of feeling. "I should have followed Sophia. I should have gone all the way." He closed his eyes. "I left you. That is the mistake I will carry with me until my last day." Tears fell slowly onto the white sheet. He did not wipe them away. He let them fall, as if he needed to wash away the years of guilt that were suffocating him. A sound broke the silence. The baby's soft cry came from the table on one side, where Lucy was holding it carefully. Alex turned slowly. His heart tightened again, but this time it was different. It was as if that little cry was calling him back to life. He staggered over to the baby, stretched out his hands, and Lucy handed it to him, her eyes filled with tears. The doctor received him with an almost sacred delicacy. The bundle was light, the body fragile, warm, alive. He held him close to his chest, and time stood still again. He looked at his daughter's face, now calm, as if she were resting, and then at the little one sleeping in his arms. He whispered in a broken voice, "He is all that remains of you, daughter." Everything remained like that for a while, hugging the baby until the crying returned louder. But here now it was not only pain, there was also a small hope, a new spark igniting inside him. He spoke to his daughter as if she could still hear him. "I spent years asking for a sign, Sophia. Just one sign." He took a deep breath and said, "The Lord sent me this, your son." The emotion made him kneel on the floor, still holding the baby in his arms. The tears wouldn't stop. Lucy was behind him, also crying, her hands on her chest. Alex raised his wet eyes to the ceiling and whispered, "I'll take care of him, daughter. I swear." His voice trembled, but the promise came out firm and true, as if heaven needed to hear it. "I'll love him for both of us. I'll give him what I couldn't give you. He'll never feel alone, Sophia, never." The baby moved a little, making a soft sound as if he understood. Alex smiled through his tears, a tired smile, but one full of love. "Do you forgive me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Charles, I know I came too late, but I feel like you heard me." He rested his forehead on the baby's little body, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. In the silence that followed, the sound of the rain returned, softer now, almost like a consolation. Lucy approached slowly, put her hand on his shoulder, and said softly, Maybe God gave you a new chance." Dr. Alex didn't answer. He just nodded, still hugging the baby inside. He knew that it was true. Heaven had somehow heard him, not when he wanted it to, but when he needed it. The pain was still there, but there was also something new growing alongside it. The certainty that even after loss, love does not end. It only changes form. And in that moment, with the baby sleeping in his arms and his daughter's body in front of him, Alex understood that the miracle was not in bringing back the past, but in giving him a reason to keep on living. The morning had barely dawned when the sound of quick footsteps was heard in the hospital corridors. Alex and Lucy were in the observation room, the baby safely asleep under the soft light of a dim lamp. The air was heavy. The calm after the storm was short-lived. Outside, serious voices of uniformed men could be heard. "It's the police," said Lucy fearfully, adjusting the sheet over the baby. "They're asking about the woman from the accident." Alex looked up, his body tense. "They're here, yes, and they seem in a hurry. They said she was driving alone to the hospital when she lost control of the car." The doctor took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. His heart was beating fast. He knew what that meant. Investigation, reports, paperwork, and above all, risk. The baby could be taken away by the state before the truth came to light. Lucy noticed the tension in his gaze. "Doctor, what are we going to do?" Alex was silent for a few seconds. The sound of the early morning rain was still fresh in his memory. Everything he had experienced in that room, the miracle, the birth, the discovery, seemed to blend into a single feeling, fear of losing everything again. "They can't take the child," Lucy said finally, firmly. "This baby is all I have left of her." Lucy approached, her voice trembling. "But doctor, you know how the system works. Until you prove that this child has your blood, they're going to want to follow protocol." "Protocol?" Alex interrupted. "Protocol doesn't understand what a miracle is." She took a deep breath, looking at the little boy sleeping in the makeshift crib. "If they find out he survived, they're going to want to take him to the municipal shelter. They'll say it's the right thing to do." Alex turned abruptly, his gaze determined. "Then we're not going to let them find out. Want to see how this ends? Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next." Lucy looked at him in surprise. "You're saying you're going to hide the baby?" She felt his determination. "Yes, just until we get the paperwork sorted out. DNA, legal adoption papers. After that, I'll take care of everything. But right now, he can't leave here." Lucy hesitated. "This is too risky, doctor. What if someone finds out?" Alex ran his hand through his hair nervously. "If they find out, I'll take responsibility." He looked at her sincerely. "I lost my daughter once. Lucy, I'm not going to lose her son, too." His gaze was so human, so full of pain and determination that Lucy couldn't say no. She swallowed, took a deep breath, and replied in a low voice, "Then tell me what to do." Alex looked at her gratefully. "No one can know. We'll say that the birth happened in the early hours of the morning, but that the baby didn't survive. In the meantime, I'll take him to my house. I have everything I need there to take care of him." Lucy nervously ran her hand over her face. "And if they ask about the baby's body, we'll say that the hospital will take care of the paperwork," she replied quickly. "And when everything has calmed down, we'll do the DNA tests. I want to prove that he is my grandson." She was silent for a moment, looking at the baby. The little one was breathing peacefully, unaware of the fear that surrounded the adults. "He cannot even imagine the magnitude of the love that is saving the doctor," said Lucy, with a sad smile. Alex knelt down next to the crib and ran his hand over the baby's forehead. "He saved more than that, Lucy. He gave me another reason to go on." Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. "Dr. Rivas, Houston Police. May we come in?" Lucy's eyes widened. "They're here." Alex got up quickly, his heart racing. "Buy me some time. Tell them I'm finishing a report." Lucy ran to the door, opened it a crack, and spoke, trying to sound calm. "One moment, please. The doctor is finishing a document. He'll see you in a moment." The police officers agreed, but remained outside, impatient. Alex, his hands trembling, took the baby in his arms. The warmth of the little body made him breathe deeply. The baby opened his mouth slightly and let out a soft sound. "Shh," he whispered. "Everything will be all right, my love." Lucy returned quickly. "Doctor, they're not going to wait long." He took the wool sweater that was on the chair and opened it, carefully wrapping the baby inside it, as if protecting his own heart. The little one almost disappeared between the fabric. "I'm going to take him now," he said decisively, heading for the service elevator. "No one uses it at this hour." Lucy grabbed his arm. "Are you sure about this?" He looked her in the eyes, and his gaze said it all. Yes. I lose him. I lose my daughter again." Lucy felt tears falling as she said, "May God watch over him, doctor." Alex took a deep breath, adjusted the sweater, and with the baby pressed tightly to his chest, he walked out the side door of the room. His steps were slow and steady. Every sound in the hallway seemed like an echo of danger, but he didn't stop. He passed the main elevators where 2 policemen were talking and continued straight to the end of the hallway. He pressed the button with his fingertips. The elevator descended slowly, creaking inside the cabin. The doctor looked at the baby and murmured in a broken voice, "From now on, you are no longer alone." The elevator opened in the parking lot. The drizzle was still falling, cleaning the floor and the sky. Alex left without looking back. The sweater hid the small body, and his heart beat alongside the baby's. Deep down, he felt fear, a lot of fear, but for the first time in many years, he also felt faith. And so, under the soft early morning rain, he left the hospital carrying in his arms not only a baby, but also the last chance at redemption that life had offered him. But when he looked at the weak baby, he realized that he had no medicine or equipment to ensure the baby's life. He was caught between the excitement of taking the child away and the reason to leave him in the hospital to keep him alive. The early morning was almost over when Alex returned to the hospital. Sophia's body had already been taken to the identification area. The silence in the hospital felt heavier than ever. The air smelled of alcohol, rain, and memories. Lucy was next to him, finishing organizing the instruments, still with a lost look in her eyes. Neither of them said anything. It wasn't necessary. There was a kind of pain that didn't need words. Alex ran his hand over his face and took a deep breath. His body felt tired, but something inside him kept him there, glued to that place, as if something were missing, as if there were still one last part of that story to tell. Lucy's voice came out weak. "Your things. Do you know where they put them?" She looked at him in surprise. "They must be there in the box with the admission record." He nodded and went to the metal table in the corner of the room. On top of it was a simple cardboard box marked with a label, "Personal belongings, unidentified victim." For a moment, his heart stopped. Reading those words was almost unbearable. He ran his fingers along the edge of the box, took a deep breath, and slowly opened it. Inside were a few things: a necklace with a cross pendant, an old wallet, some coins, a broken lipstick, and a piece of paper folded in a hurry with worn corners. Alex took the paper, curious, but what he saw left him frozen inside. The name written in one corner in quick, childish handwriting, Sophia. His hands began to shake. He couldn't breathe. He unfolded the paper carefully, his heart pounding, and began to read. The words were simple, crooked, written quickly with a pen that had almost no ink left. "God, please help me. I want to find my dad and my mom. I love them, even though they never knew who I was." For a few seconds, Alex couldn't breathe. His vision blurred. He read it again, and each time it hurt more. Lucy noticed and approached him, concerned. "Doctor, what is that?" He didn't answer, just handed her the paper with trembling hands, tears already falling. Lucy read slowly, her voice breaking. When she finished, she looked at him, not knowing what to say. She knew. Alex closed his eyes as if those words weighed too heavily on him. She knew who I was, Lucy said between sobs. She knew. He rested his hands on the table and lowered his head, and even then his voice failed him. Even then he wrote that he loved us. The sound of rain filled the room again, now falling softly and steadily, as if the sky itself were crying with them. Alex pressed the paper tightly against his chest, the fabric of his shirt soaked with tears. I thought she had forgotten me, he whispered. I thought that maybe hated me for not finding her. Lucy put her hand on his shoulder without saying anything. The doctor took a deep breath and opened the paper once more. The shaky letters, the simple handwriting, the haste in the words. All of it brought back the face of his daughter when she was a child, the sound of her laughter that he hadn't heard in decades. He ran his finger over the words as if touching the face of a loved one. She forgave me before she died. She forgave me. Her voice was almost a whisper, even though I didn't deserve it. The silence that followed was profound. Only the sound of the rain filled the air. Lucy wiped a tear from her face and spoke in a low voice, almost like a prayer. Maybe that's why she came, doctor, to tell you that you were still her dad, that she loved you. Alex stood still, her words hitting him like a blow and a comfort at the same time. He looked at the sheet and kissed the paper tenderly, as if it were sacred. Then he held it to his chest and closed his eyes. Thank you, daughter, he murmured. Thank you for still calling me Dad. Lucy held back her tears, but she couldn't. She turned away, wiping the tears that kept falling. Alex took a deep breath. The pain was still there, alive and throbbing, but there was something new mixed in with it, a kind of peace that comes with forgiveness. The paper trembled between his fingers, and each letter seemed to have life, as if Sophia were speaking to him from somewhere where pain no longer existed. The doctor looked up, his face wet, and said softly, I found you, Sophia. Too late, but I found you. And he stayed there alone with the paper pressed to his chest, crying like a man who had lost everything and at the same time received back what he needed most, the forgiveness of a daughter who never stopped loving him. The sun had not yet risen when Alex entered the neonatal ICU. The hospital was silent, almost asleep, and the only sound breaking that silence was the faint beep of the monitors. That sound, which had once made him tense, was now music. He walked slowly, as if afraid of waking a miracle. At the end of the room, the small incubator glowed under the soft light. Inside, surrounded by wires and sensors, was the fragile baby, tiny but alive. Every breath, every tiny movement was a victory. Lucy was already sitting there with a tired smile on her face. Alex stood next to her, looked through the glass of the incubator, and felt a lump in his throat. He was so small, but so strong. He resisted. Lucy said with a broken voice, against all odds, she felt emotional. I think this child was born to show that there is still hope. The doctor took a deep breath, his eyes filled with tears. That's why I gave him that name, Bento. Lucy smiled in surprise. Bento? Alex nodded slightly. Yes, it was the name that came to mind the day he survived the surgery. I thought that if life insists on going on, it's because there is still something to learn. The sun began to rise slowly, and golden light streamed through the window, illuminating the incubator. The glass reflected the glow of dawn, and for a moment it seemed as if the baby was enveloped in pure light. Lucy placed her hand on the doctor's arm. You know, maybe she gave you back what you lost. Alex looked at her and smiled, his eyes filled with tears. No, Lucy replied in a calm, deep tone. She taught me that love doesn't die. It just changes form. They remained silent, just looking at the baby. He moved his little hand, and that simple gesture made them both cry. Alex leaned over, opened the incubator door, and ran his fingertips over the baby's soft skin. You have no idea what it took to get you here, little one, he whispered, but you were worth every tear. Lucy took a deep breath, trying not to cry. You're lucky, doctor. You have someone who believes in you. He smiled a little. It's not luck, it's love. And love is what keeps us going, even when everything seems lost. The baby made a soft sound, a murmur that made Lucy laugh softly. Look at that. It seems he understood. Alex laughed too, wiping away the tears that continued to fall. He understands more than we think. He came from pain, but he was born to be a reminder of faith. The sun was higher now, filling the room with a gentle warmth. The window glass began to fog up, and for a moment Alex felt that everything he had experienced, the loss, the fear, the guilt, was being washed away by that new light. Lucy watched him in silence, thinking to herself how many lives that man had saved, but that only now, at that moment, did he seem truly saved. He opened the incubator door again, took the baby out with the greatest care in the world, and placed him on his chest. The little one settled in immediately, as if he recognized that heart that was beating fast, but full of tenderness. "Look at that," Lucy said, smiling. "He's so light, it seems as if the air itself is holding him up." She replied with a trembling voice, "It's love that holds him up." Dr. Alex looked at the baby in his arms, the sunlight illuminating his little face, and felt a lump in his throat. "You're going to grow up, little one. You're going to live the life your mother couldn't, and I'm going to be here every day to remember her through you." Lucy stepped back a little, leaving him alone in that moment. To him alone. The doctor remained silent, gently rocking the baby. Outside, the day had fully dawned. The sky over Houston, previously covered with clouds, was now clear blue, and the rain from the night before had left the air clean and fresh. Alex looked out the window and smiled, his voice low, almost a whisper. "The sun always comes back, even after the worst storm." The baby moved his little hand as if in response. Lucy approached and said with tears in her eyes, "It's a new beginning, doctor." He felt her hugging the baby tighter. "Yes, Lucy, a dawn of hope." And there, amid the sound of the monitors and the light of the rising sun, Alex Rivas felt that the whole world fit into that moment, a small but infinite moment, in which pain gave way to love and loss became a promise of life. The news began to spread through the hospital in a way that no one could stop. First, it was a nurse who whispered about it in the hallway, then a nursing technician who swore he had heard the baby crying coming from the autopsy room. Within a few hours, everyone knew. A woman had died, but her baby was alive. People talked with amazement, with fear, with tears in their eyes. Some said it was a miracle, others that it was impossible, but everyone, without exception, felt something different in the air, a kind of respect, as if something sacred had happened there in the main hallway. Some doctors stopped working just to look from afar through the window of the neonatal ICU. Inside, the tiny baby, so small he could fit in the palm of a hand, was breathing with the help of machines. But he was breathing. Lucy walked through the hallways and listened to the comments. It was Dr. Rivas who did it. Yes, it was him. They say the baby cried in the middle of the darkness. My God, that's otherworldly. She didn't correct anyone. She just smiled and let people believe what their hearts felt. Deep down, she couldn't understand everything that had happened either. Alex, on the other hand, remained silent. He didn't seek attention or praise. He walked through the hospital like a quiet shadow, his eyes tired but filled with a peace that no one could explain that morning. He waited until the commotion died down. When the sun began to shine through the windows in the hallway, he walked slowly to the hospital chapel. The place was empty. The candlelight flickered, reflecting off the images of the saints. The air smelled of wax and silence. Alex knelt on the first pew, with his hands clasped and his head bowed. For a while, he said nothing. He just breathed, trying to find the right words. The tears came before his voice. He closed his eyes and felt his heart tighten. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Thank you." His voice broke. He tried again with more strength, with more truth. "Thank you, daughter, for not leaving completely." The sound echoed in the small chapel as if the walls were returning. The feeling multiplied inside. He remembered everything. The cold room, the storm, the scalpel suspended in the air, the miracle happening before his eyes. And now that baby alive, breathing, proving that love can cross over even death. The doctor ran his hand over his eyes and continued in silence. He asked for nothing, wanted no answers, only gave thanks. For a moment he thought he heard her voice, a soft whisper, like the wind passing between the candles. Dad opened his eyes slowly. His heart raced, but he wasn't afraid. He smiled, knowing he wasn't alone. Lucy appeared at the chapel door without making a sound. She stood there, watching. The doctor seemed like a different man. There was a kind of light in him that he didn't have before. She approached slowly and put her hand on his shoulder. "Everyone is talking about you, doctor," she said with a slight smile. Even those who didn't believe in miracles now believe. Alex looked at her with a serene gaze. "The miracle," he replied slowly, "was not that the baby lived, but that I had a second opportunity." Lucy held back her tears. "And you deserved it." He smiled wearily and shook his head. "No one deserves a miracle, Lucy. We just receive it and try to be better afterward." The chapel bell rang softly, marking noon. The quiet sound mingled with the distant murmur of the corridors, with life returning to normal. Alex got up slowly, looked at the altar one last time, and made the sign of the cross before leaving. He paused for a moment at the door, looked up at the ceiling, and murmured with a smile, "Thank you, Sophia." Lucy accompanied him in silence. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, illuminating every corner of the hospital. Nurses hurried by, doctors laughed, patients looked out the windows. But among them all, there was a common feeling, a different energy, something that made each one believe a little more in life. In the ICU, the baby slept peacefully, his little lungs rising and falling in a calm rhythm. A ray of light fell right on his little face like a blessing, and it was there, on that ordinary morning transformed into a miracle, that the whole hospital understood that some stories are not meant to be explained, they are meant to be felt, and Alex and Sophia's was one of those. The morning was quiet, the hospital was returning to its normal rhythm, but inside the room, time seemed to have stopped. Alex was sitting in a simple armchair near the window. The soft light of dawn slowly entered, gilding the sheet, the floor, and the small body he held in his arms. The baby slept peacefully, breathing with that soft sound that only newborns have. With each breath, his chest rose and fell, and Alex couldn't stop looking. He ran his fingers carefully over the child's face and felt his heart tighten. "Heart, you have no idea how much you are loved, little one," he whispered in a low, trembling voice. "Someday I will tell you who your mother was." He was silent for a moment, as if waiting for an answer. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sigh, and the doctor continued in an almost broken whisper, "And how much she loved you." His eyes filled with tears, but there was a smile on his face. The sunlight touched the window softly, illuminating the baby in his arms. It was as if dawn itself had stopped there to bless that moment. Alex looked up, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me feel the love." The window, illuminating the baby in his arms. It was as if the sunrise itself had stopped there to bless that moment. Alex looked up, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me feel love again." For a moment, everything seemed perfect. The distant sounds of the hospital, the birds outside, the gentle warmth of the morning, the miracle sleeping in his arms. It was as if the whole world was saying that despite the pain, love always finds a way to continue. The baby moved again, and Alex hugged him tighter, feeling that warmth of life against his chest. He looked up at the window and smiled with tears in his eyes. Love conquers Fritura. The image remained there, the tired man with the baby in his arms, bathed in the sunlight coming through the window. The question that remained in the air was simple, but profound. Do you believe that love can conquer even death?